Dr. Hausner, are you there?
Yes.
Okay. Let's wait for one more minute.
Sure. I'm waiting for you. I'm right here.
So Helen,
Yeah.
so we don't see Dr. Hausner's face, right?
I know. So it has been a problem.
Okay, all right.
I thought we did. No,
Now it's gone again.
I'm looking at you.
Yeah, I couldn't see you.
That's fine. We'll just go as
That's
it
fine. Okay, let's get started. Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Good evening, everyone. My name is Helen Zhang. I'm the chair of the Leadership Peer Support Committee. Welcome to the CAPA Leadership Peer Support Program Special Lecture Series for year 2023 and to 2024. So today is the season 3 first episode of the year. So it is my privilege to host this meeting today. Our guest speaker today is Dr. J Hausner from the University of Texas Health Science Center at Houston. Dr. Hausner will give us a talk about finding, evaluating, and keeping a position in pathology. And a little bit introduction for Dr. Hausner. He received his medical degree from State University of New York, Upstate Medical Center, and had his residency training in at the University of Florida, and also had a surgical pathology fellowship at American Cancer Society. Followed as the faculty of Baylor College of Medicine. And after a few years at Baylor, he entered the community practice and was the founder of a pathology private group in Houston for more than 42 years. He now serves as a clinical associate professor at McGovern Medical School, University of Texas Health Science Center. So Dr. Hausner has a unique experience of both academic and private study experience. And also he held many other positions in his career, including president of Harris County Medical Society of Texas and trustee of Texas Medical Center and the governor of College of American Pathologists, the chair of CAP, Council on Government and Professional Affairs, and associate director of Archives of Pathology and Laboratory Medicine. So, you know, job hunting is a very common topic, and also not a lot of people actually talking about this in detail. So I think it's a great honor to have him, you know, to discuss more detail about this. We all need that kind of experience, right? And also for all the audience, thank you for joining in. If you can feel free to type any questions in the QA box at the bottom of your screen, and Dr. Hausner will answer your questions after the talk. Okay. All right. Now turn the podium to Dr. Hausner, please.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Helen. First, I must say that in preparing for this talk, I had the opportunity to review the website of the CAPA and was absolutely floored by its elegance, and also a review of the newsletter letters. They are very high quality, and congratulations for that. Now, in my talk, I'm going to do my best to provide down-to-earth information it's geared for young pathologists, but older pathologists might also pick up a point or two. I've given this talk many times, but over the decades, each time that I've given it, my own experiences have changed. And when I would review the previous PowerPoint, I would always have the need to make certain adjustments. Pathology is a dynamic specialty and has changed over the decades that I've been in practice. So during this talk, we're going to talk about finding open positions, ways of first locating a position, try and talk about evaluating practice opportunities when a pathologist is presented with an opportunity, how to evaluate whether this would be something good or not so good, whether it would work. The part of that, and this is very important, is to assess personal and family needs. Typical pathology practice, we're together for, say 8 to 10, 12 hours of our day. But then we go home, we have a different life entirely. We dress differently, we move differently, we eat differently, different people. We have our pets, we have our children. We have family, we have our mom, our dad, on and on. So they're also stakeholders in the process of finding a place to practice. We'll describe the visit and the interview process, and then describe some features of what would make a pathologist successful in a practice. Now, first, we use the terms academic and private practice and community practice, and we think of them as definite slots, when in fact they're really blurred together. The boundaries of what makes an academic pathology group versus a community practice or a private practice group have really become less distinct over the years. Most of our practices, most of our academic institutions have what they call outreach, which is really a way of discussing either community practice or private practice. And pathologists such as me, who was in private practice, still maintained a relationship with the medical center. I was volunteer faculty for decades at UT and also at Baylor, and then I rose through the ranks and ended up a trustee of the entire medical center while I was practicing 35 miles away. So these things, we're going to use those terms, but with some understanding that they're really blurred. Now, part of this is what exactly is a pathologist? And this really came to a head in the early 80s in the time of President James Barger, who was a private pathologist in Las Vegas, Nevada. And during this time, there was some legislation that was in play. And the question was what exactly does a pathologist do? And we're always asked, okay, I'm a pathologist, what do I do? And I answer the question depending on who's asking it, from the simple to the complex. But for our purposes, what we either providing service, we're engaged in research, or teaching, or some combination of the three. That's what we do. That's pathology. Now, finding and evaluating a position, I like to think of it as 3 stages. Before the visit, then the visit to the practice, and then what you think about, what a candidate would think about after the visit. And that would include when a position is actually offered. Now, first, who might be looking for a pathologist with my skill set? Question we all ask. Word of mouth. The hard answer is that the better jobs, the better positions, or what we might consider the better positions, tend to be passed around. That they're talked about. Somebody makes a call or inquires about who might be around, and what helps, and this is somewhat tough to do in our busy days, but it really helps that showing up is important. If there's a local pathology society, go to the meetings and don't be the life of the party, but walk around and meet people who are practicing in the community. State society meetings, national meetings. If there happened to be a program for recent alumni, to attend that, and a little bit of interaction in the local, state, and national meetings can go a long way to making yourself a familiar face and your name come to the top when someone asks about who might be a good candidate. The second is faculty members, and I can't overemphasize how important this is, that anytime that I was interested in a pathologist that practiced in the medical center, I always called someone on the faculty. And a corollary of that for residents is be nice to your faculty, because that they will be the point people to begin the process in many, many cases. So I can't stress enough how important it is for a resident or a young trainee or a young faculty member or senior faculty members to be nice to everybody. Now, there are other ways. There's the CAP has an online career center. USCAP has something similar. There are two private ones that I know about, Career MD and I Hire Physicians. That's careermd.com and ihirephysicians.com. I'm going to show you a quick example in a moment. Notices in professional publications. You may notice in the back of the journals, there are always, or tend to be, I don't know always, but there are frequently advertisements. Some of those are good. Others, there really is someone who has an inside track, and they need to post it. And but if you see something that you like, and if it seems that it fits, doesn't hurt to apply. And then finally, in desperation, you find the names of hospitals, call up, cold calling. That rarely works, but I put it down there because people do it. This is just a page from the CAP Career Line Center to show you that it exists. This is USCAP job board. The CAPA has its own job site. I grabbed this from the in my research for the talk today. And these are essentially recruiting websites, but they have a lot of jobs for posting. Now, some of them, if you keep an eye on them, have been there for 10 years, which may or may not reflect the quality of the job. And I'm not necessarily recommending any specific heavy weight to these kind of sites, but they do give you an idea about what's out there. Another one is the ihirephysicians.com that talks about job postings. Okay, before the visit, I talked about personal needs. Look in the mirror. Try and think about your own preferences and needs. Are you a service pathologist, a research pathologist, teaching? Is a position that's been offered really a good fit, not only for you, but for your spouse, your children, a partner, moms and dads, and professional collaborators. how would they feel about a move, the disruption involved in moving across the country? And the part of that issue is, do you really want to live there? Now, this is crucial for some and less so for others. It's my impression that there are people that one year they're in Miami, Florida, and the next year they have a better job and they're in Minnesota. And other people who grew up in, say, the northwest part of the United States and state of Washington, for example, really and truly need to think twice about coming to Houston. People in Washington state like to hike. It's cool. Come to Houston, and the best we can do for a hill is a steep driveway. And that may be a deal killer for that other important part of your own life. If for example, there is an interest in classical music, and right now you're in New York City, which is just bursting with opportunity. There may be a good job opportunity in somewhere, in semi-rural Kansas, and that might or might not work for you. It may be just crippling some very important interests that you have. So in addition to the professional, it can't be emphasized enough that will you be happy there in the rest of your life? Now, at the visit, first of all, you're going in as a highly trained medical scientist, okay? You are not going there as a pity me, I want a job. You are in demand, you are highly trained, and you're all excellent. So you have to have an attitude that this group would be fortunate if they take a liking to me. Now, watch and learn, and some of this can be done silently while you're being interviewed. Sitting in a room in an interview with a pathologist, in walks the gastroenterologist. Well, how does the pathologist interact with the gastroenterologist? Is it a confrontational reaction? Do they come in and call each other by their first names? Are they friendly, or is it a trusting, back and forth, mutually appreciative relationship, or is it a battle? And you're just sitting there watching it, and you're getting an idea about how things work in that group. Watch as you walk down the hall and go from one interview to the next. Try and determine how the pathologists interact with each other and how they interact with the hospital or medical school employees. Now, if sitting at an interview, if the phone rings during the interview, what do you hear? Is it you're only hearing one side of it, and it's just a vignette. But nevertheless, it's possible by just remaining silent, you can get an idea about what it might be like to be there. Something to ask or see if it comes out: is the group collegial with neighboring pathologists? Do they say, yeah, there's a group on the other side of town, we hate them, we in constant battle with them? Or they think they're high and mighty every time we send them a case, they change our diagnosis. Now, an important differentiating point between groups is the pathologist's camaraderie with each other. Do they socialize? Some pathologists might have season tickets to the basketball game and that they share. Others may go to each other's house for barbecue. Other groups, nobody knows where anyone lives. But it's an important pickup while you're there to try and imagine what it would be like for me to be sitting with these people. Oh, ask about other hospitals in the community. If nobody comes to visit Baylor or UT for an interview and doesn't ask about, there's this big cancer center across the street. Do you guys see any cancer? And of course, the answer is, of course we do. Unfortunately, there's plenty to go around. But it's a question that in the Texas Medical Center is almost universally asked somewhere. Ask about, say, well, this is a very nice hospital. I saw construction crews. I was coming in. What all is going on? Find out about expansion. It might open up a conversation about new hospitals in the area. And accreditation of the hospital and the lab, that's something you really don't have to ask. It's kind of an insulting question, but you should be able to find the answer by glancing at the wall sometime in during the interview process. Ask about the affiliation of the clinicians with academia. If it's a private group, let's say in Jackson, Mississippi, and you're at a private hospital, you can say, gee, I know that you guys are volunteer faculty at the university, but what about the clinicians? Are they involved there? And it gives you an idea about what the level of practice might be. It's fair to ask a question about the case mix. Say, in the course of the conversation, you can say, do you guys see a lot of breast? What about prostate? Just in passing, not to interrogate, but just to develop the technique to gather that kind of information. Because if you're a surgical pathologist, that's what you'll be looking at. The mission of the pathology department, what's the balance between service, research, and teaching? What is the job that you're actually going to do? I'm a clinical associate professor at McGovern Medical School, which essentially says that I'm not really involved in the research part, but I'm certainly involved in the service and the teaching. And I have participated in clinical research as an aside, but it's not my primary responsibility. If it's possible to meet someone in hospital administration, it's a good idea to touch base, and it's a good idea to have to know something about the hospital. Is it owned by HCA? Is it owned by United Health Systems? Is it owned by Tenet? Is it run by the county? It's something that you want to try and have come out during the course of the interview. Getting into the nitty-gritty about your job, what is the structure of the practice? Is it are the pathologists hospital employees of the school? Is it a corporation, a partnership? Is it a hospital department? How long have the pathologists been at the facility? It could be that they just got there and nothing is really settled in, or it could be that they've been there for decades. Is there an independent lab that they practice at the hospital, but they also have, which I didn't have, but I'll just say it, Hausner and Associates, a big lab across the street that's independent from the hospital, and might actually get some business from the hospital, but is out there covering surgery centers and is a separate entity. And if it does, what would be your relationship with that? Does the hospital have satellites? These days, just about every hospital does. And do the pathologists serve completely separate facilities? Like, for example, UT, where I practice, we cover both the Memorial Hermann Hospital, which is attached to the medical school physically, and then across town, LBJ, which is a county hospital. What will be your role and where? You could find yourself, I'm gonna give you a bad example. You go somewhere and it's a 2,000 bed hospital, but what they need is they need someone to sit at a little auxiliary clinic 30 miles away, and that you wouldn't be at that big hospital. You'd be part of the group in a sense, but you would be isolated. Is this a new position, or will you be replacing a pathologist? Something that's very hard to ask, but you might save this for some independent research as best you can do, is what's the group's track record with new associates? Do people come in and they're nurtured and they stay? Or is it a revolving door and people are leaving? You can't really ask that, but it's a good thing to keep in mind and try and find out. Who makes the decisions in the group? Does everybody get together and vote? There are faculty meetings or group meetings, but who actually makes the call? Is it a democracy, or what is it? In my practice, everybody's opinion was asked, but at the end, everybody voted, but only my vote counted. But believe me, I took into account everything that everyone said about any decision that was coming along. And then it's fair to ask, how are you guys paid? Does the hospital pay you? Do you bill the patients? Someone's billing the patients. Whether it's the hospital or somebody, it's best if it's the pathologist billing the patient. But that's a good question to ask. This I put in just for laughs. I love this. It sort of describes a authoritarian practice, and I just have kept it for years. It's just for a quick laugh. Now, at the visit and then after the visit, what are you going to be paid the first year? Everybody wants to know that and expects a big bump, I would hope. But then the next question, also fair to ask, is what is a reasonable financial expectation for me going forward. In other words, I know you're going to pay me X in the first year, but what's the track record? Is it pretty much, am I going to have an opportunity to grow and for my situation to improve? And that blends into what they plan on doing as far as being a partner or being a higher status within the group. Then you ask yourself, how do you see your career developing? Is you go to a place, everybody's nice, and what they want you to do just doesn't fit with what you really truly want to do. You say, they're nice people, but they're having a little. They want me to do coag. And I think of myself as a different kind of hematopathologist or blood banker, something that you just have this feeling that you're going to be getting into something that maybe you know something about, or maybe you don't, but you know that starting the job, you're not going to enjoy it. The question of partnership. These days, it's somewhat a decreasing word, but it's a good question to ask. And then what would be the terms? And that gets us back to that independent lab thing, especially in private practice, that the pathology group can have a contract with the hospital, and that could be what you are being offered, and there exists a totally independent business somewhere out there that might be lucrative, but the question is, would you have any opportunity to participate in that? Or would you just be in the hospital person? A very important point is, don't be afraid of a starter type position. Think for a moment about pathologists that you know, and then try and imagine the percent of people that leave residency and stay in one position for that first position after residency for the duration of their career. The answer is that's a minority. So most of us we don't change every 6 months, but it's a reasonable expectation that that first position may not be your last position. In my case, I was at Baylor. I was with a pathology group. I separated from the pathology group, and then now I'm at UT. Other people travel from one medical school to another, or change practices, change areas of the country. So a starter type position takes something that you might learn from, and that you say, this would be a really good place to start and would really be good on my record. And I could learn a lot from these folks. And if it works out, great. If not, at some unspecified time, I'll move on. After the visit, ask about partnership eligibility, time to partnership, what's the path to partnership, who makes the call, can one person blackball me, what would be, and this is a fair question if you're asked that you could be a partner, you kind of can't really ask directly, how much do you guys make? But it's a good idea to ask for a ballpark. So, give me an idea about where this is going. I mean, after all, you're moving somewhere, giving your life to this place. So you have the right to obtain this information, but then not go back to the school and say, God, you wouldn't believe what those people are making. That's out. So this is an opportunity to get some information and be told something in confidence. Personal leave is important. Um, uh, this has come up in several times in my career, that the question comes, sure, you can block off and save leave, but don't expect to get 60 days of leave saved up and then go on a 2-month sabbatical. Because people are back there, they have to do the work. And it's a good idea to ask or to find out or to inquire, when you guys take vacation, how long do you guys go for? Is it like a week or 2 weeks, or how would you feel if I had to go away for a month? And if they say no, I mean, we can't do that, then you know something. Meetings and educational expenses, criteria for termination. Can they just tell you to hit the road, or does there have to be a reason? And then a covenant not to compete. That if you're in the area, you like the area, there's a job down the road, and you're prevented from moving to that job because you've signed a covenant not to compete. Now, this will come as a contract. And I always told anyone that came to me that they had to have their attorney review it, that I wasn't going to sign it without evidence that they had shown it to an attorney. Now, because it's an important document, but I also tell them that this is basically the contract that we've used for many years. And, I really don't want to see it come back all redlined, with marks all over it. And, if there's one or two things, let me know. And that's worked out pretty well in both ways. Sometimes they come back with nothing. Sometimes they come back with one or two things that I might or might not adapt. I might not take on. And people have come up with good ideas. I said, that you're right. And I've changed everybody's contract to make it better for everybody, and that a good point was made. But then also, in spite of that, I've gotten back contracts, the one that we've worked on that we know works, with all sorts of wants and red lines and circles. And what that is, you just say, I really can't deal with it, and this may not be a right practice for you. So now, if you show it to your attorney and the attorney says, this really is a bad contract, then you don't even have to redline it. You just say, thank you, if you trust the attorney, and you just withdraw from the position. Very briefly, the lone pathologist. If you're going to be a pathologist by yourself, it's best to talk to other pathologists in the area, because heaven knows you'll need friends. And the best advice I could give, because usually that would mean that you're contracted with the hospital, is the first contract sets the tone for the second. So work hard to get the very best contract at first. What do pathologists look for in a new colleague? The quality of training, fellowships, interests of the pathologist, previous experience versus newly trained. Some positions are suitable for previous experience. Others are really good for newly trained. um, uh, 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 rely on the recommendations of pathologists they know and respect. They're going to call your institution. They are going to call wherever you happen to be. It just is the way that it is. And a corollary of that is, we'll get into that in just a moment, is be nice to everybody. And pathology is a relatively small profession. And somebody like me, some of you may know me. And if you don't know me, you could find out about who's this Richard Hausner that's talking to us the other day. It would take 2 phone calls to find somebody that knew me. And it works the other way as well. Now, an interviewer might gently test your knowledge on the spot. I put in the word gently because if they do something like say, tell you what we're going to do, we're going to give you a test of 20 cases, and we need you to sit at this microscope. We're going to give you an hour and see what you think, and then close the door on you. Maybe say, would you like some coffee? That's one way. I didn't do that. What I would do is be sitting at my desk, and I'm an active pathologist, so there's always cases around. So I would say, I have this case that, I'm not really even sure what it is, which is usually either sadly or effectively the case. So why don't you take a look at it with me? You drive. And I move over to the other side of the microscope. And after gathering some experience, and several of you might nod your head, you can tell in a matter of seconds about how the slide moves across the stage and what the thinking of the person on the other side is. And I found it really easy to see if I was dealing with someone that really was going to fit. Now, I would back out the fact that, maybe I was doing the best I could not to be intimidating. I would be, that's where the gentle part comes in. But still, it's possible that some way your knowledge might be tested. When I went to UT, now I had applied to UT. I was interviewed at the same place where I'm at now in 1977 and was offered a job, and I went to Baylor instead. But when I went back to UT after so many decades, everyone, of course, was different. I wasn't given slides to look at. What I was asked to do was to bring 10 of my interesting cases and present it to the residents. And faculty just happened to want to sit in. And I knew what was going on. And, I didn't hear any complaints, so I got the job. Communication skills, personal warmth. It's possible to, at an interview, to hit just the right note of showing some warmth without overdoing it. The appearance at the interview, this is one that I've changed over the years. It started off where I said, you need to wear a good pair of shoes, nice pants, a tie, and a jacket for the men. For the women, I didn't go there. Over the years, the standards have changed, but I would say wear what you would wear to a nice Sunday lunch, something like that. Can't go wrong. And then watch what they're wearing. If possible, try and get an idea. I recently gave a similar talk to this at a school in New York City where I go a lot, and I wasn't sure how to show up. So I put on a tie, and it was the winter, and just had a vest with my winter jacket. It was fine. I was overdressed, but made the cut. What you don't want to do is come in sloppy, and that's that's where I'm going to leave it. I used to say years ago, and this is something that I don't say anymore. I used to say, well, we all thought he was a nice guy, but I wish he had a beard. And that was when facial hair was an issue, and now it's not. The things are much better now, and I like it that we can go to work more casually and show up at an interview and not necessarily have to go out and buy a suit. So it's better, but I have to say something about appearance. Now, keeping a position, 3 A's: affability, availability, and accuracy. Affability, availability, accuracy. Relations with fellow pathologists. This is like a marriage. You're together for 8 or 10 or 12 hours a day. Learn with your colleagues to build trust, compromise, forgive, condone. Nothing is worse than having a monster on the floor. Nobody, ruins it for everybody. Everybody. Always be courteous, be thoughtful, considerate, appreciative, respectful. Know your own limitations. Understand what you know and what you don't know. You can say, we didn't have much prostate where I was at last. And then allow others to grow and mature. That if you've been with a group for a long time and a new person comes in, allow them to grow, allow them to mature, allow them to become your colleague. And this is just a bunch of pathologists, and there's always somebody going, making a noise that you don't like or something, and you just learn to ignore it. The most important single ingredient is knowing how to get along with people. Roosevelt said that. And then on a TV show, I picked this one up, that not every insult requires a response. If something goes wrong and somebody insults you, or you make a mistake, or there's some interaction, the very next day when you see that person, what you do is you say, hi, I hope you, nice to see you today. You don't have to respond. It can just be set aside, and everyone's better for it. And getting along with surgeons at a frozen section, I love this one where the pathologist has his arm around the forlorn surgeon giving a frozen section diagnosis that was unexpected. And there's just different ways to say the same thing. Now, we are physicians, okay? We have an MD degree. We are not just like helpers. We're equal to the clinicians. I like to think of us as the smartest people in the building. That may or may not be true, but why not? Be a friend and a confidant to clinicians. Allow them to tell you things. Be the scholarly resource. Now, I've been amazed at the number of times people have called me up to ask me something that they were supposed to know. And what I do is I say, if I know it, I say, I tell them what I think it is in a gentle way. If I don't know what it is, I say, I think I know something about it. It's around here somewhere. Give me your cell. I'll call you back in a few minutes. Get on Google and find out what it is they were talking about, or a book, or whatever you have to do. When you walk down the hall, be a welcome sight to everybody. Be respectful of the medical technologists. Be respectful to the nurses. Respect the administrator. Keep your appearance once you're at the job. It's true that you might be in your room all day long, looking at slides, and you might be theoretically able to wear what you'd mow the lawn with. Nevertheless, as a general rule, keep your appearance consistent with what it would be if you were a clinician in that institution who has to enter a patient's room. That's just a rule of thumb. And then represent pathology in the community. Have a good answer for what a pathologist does. I was the leader of my group. I joined the Chamber of Commerce out in that part of Houston. I ended up giving a talk about something to do with pathology at one of their luncheons, and then eventually they would people would come up to me and tell me that they just paid my bill, and they were happy that that they heard that everything was good, and they said, "Thank God you're here and that we have you in the community." And so that's what can be done. Your neighbors, who they'll ask what you do. Sitting around a coffee table at your neighbor's house, out in the yard. Be proud of who you are and what you are, and have the knowledge to talk about it in a good way. Know ahead of time what you might say. Be nice to office staff. By that I mean your staff, and also the other staff. Like if you have a gastroenterologist that is sending that you have to call periodically, and the same person is answering the phone, say, I talk to you all the time. What is your name? It's Kathy. Okay, that Kathy goes into as a note in my phone for that doctor. When I call again, she answers the phone. I say, "Hi, Kathy, this is Dr. Hausner. I need to speak with Dr. X." And you get right through. And it just adds, Be fun. People want to sit next to you if you go into the doctor's dining room, or there's a conference that you're all going to, and you sit there and somebody walks in and says, "Hey, Richard, is that seat open?" I say, "Sure, sit down." Then that's a sign that you're accepted and they like you. As much as it can be sometimes painful, attend hospital social functions, the annual holiday party, Doctor's Day, any of that. just show up. Don't have to be the life of the party. Make an appearance. You're a doctor. Vendors of the grapevine, they'll come in and remember that they're trying to sell you something. They're very friendly and they're helpful. And they're looking that they like, you're talking to them, and anything that you gossip with them will be told in the next stop that they make. So if you don't say something that you don't want at all. You just be on guard when vendors come in. They're helpful. We love them. We get good information, have good relationship, but learn to understand the boundaries. Serve on hospital medical staff, hospital committees and medical staff committees. The decisions are going to be made about pathology, whether the pathologist is there or not. And it could turn into a horror. For example, if they're adding to the hospital and they're changing something about where the pathologists are going to be, or how the flow is going to be, and it could be something that's completely wrong. And once it occurs, is hardwired, is very hard to reverse, and would not have happened if the pathology department was properly represented at the committee at inception. That's hard work, and it's extra, and it's not paid for, but it can be paid for indirectly if something goes wrong. Cheerfully stay late for a frozen section. I avoid wherever I can to ask the question. Sometimes I do it, but not often. About, are we done? Okay, it's fine. We just did one. Are you be sending more? It can be asked, but it really depends on who's on the other end of the phone. Whatever you do, is don't try and talk anybody out of a frozen section. Like if somebody wants curettings frozen at 9:00 at night, and you say, well, what's he going to tell you? You just don't do that. You go in, never let them figure out they can do without you. Never, ever do that. Return all calls. On the weekends, when I was on call at my hospital, I would always stop by the ER, just walk through. And if I was walking down the hall, I would see, for example, an OB-GYN walking down the hall, and I would know, I said, oh my God, I'm going to hear, what's a pathologist doing in the hospital? And on a Saturday, my goodness. And what I learned to do is when I would walk down the hall and I would see the cardiologist or the OB-GYN, I'd have a big smile on my face. And I would say, what in the world is a cardiologist doing in the hospital on a Saturday at 12:30 in the afternoon? And then I just kind of laugh. He says, well, what are you doing here? I say, yeah, well, we sign out stuff and we gross things, and we check the clinical lab, and there are things for us to do. And then it becomes it diffuses the whole thing. You don't have to put up with the intimation that somehow or another we have a cushy job, which you and I know we don't. Never let them figure out they can do without you. Always use we, not I. We're a group. Never say I think it is. It's we think it is. And when a clinician comes into your office and says, hey, Richard, this case was looked at. Would you mind looking at it again? Well, I get it out, and I see that my colleague down the hall signed out the case. I said, here, I can get the slides. let's go down and find Dr. Smith, who signed it out, and let's go over it together. A pathology department has one diagnosis. That thing about where they show it to another pathologist in the group and the diagnosis changes is a no-no. I really feel strongly about that as far as the getting along in a group and even getting along in the hospital. We're as good as the last diagnosis. Clinicians are very mindful of the quality of our reports. Avoid junk in, junk out. Try and say something that adds value, something that it's a hernia sac and that the mesothelial cells are reactive. There's vascular congestion, something, or it's that there's no malignancy, just something rather than hernia sac, herniorrhaphy, hernia sac. That can be done by a computer. And we don't want that. A computer does not have a heart, and we do. And so we should say what we see and be mindful that those small cases are what is the economic driver of every practice, be it academic or be it private practice. That if we stood around and waited for the most difficult cases to come along, and that was all we were interested in, we would be very hungry pathologists. Get clinical information and correlate the comment. Sometimes you get, let's say a patient had a stem cell transplant. The clinician does a skin biopsy, comes over rash. Doesn't even say that there was a stem cell transplant. If I get a biopsy of skin that says rash, I use that medical record, that electronic medical record, look up the elements, see that the patient had a stem cell transplant. They're concerned about graft versus host. Instead of giving that a line about what you see and that this should be correlated with the clinical information, the report goes out without the word anywhere that there's been a stem cell transplant, when is wrong. If the clinician writes rash, you look it up, and then you say, this is a 69-year-old patient with a recent stem cell transplant, now with a concerning rash for graft versus host. The findings on the biopsy support the clinical impression. You've now turned something that could be done by a computer into something that the clinician would look at and read and say, boy, that pathologist is good. And if in 2 years that case comes back, somebody knows the context about what was going on. And this last point, I believe this is the last point I'm going to make, is the issue of atypia and consistent with. Was a recent article that a couple of months ago in the archives about how far pathologists should go in reports. You know, we say atypia, consistent with, supports, and when we know darn well what it is. And somebody wrote a very nice article about it with some data. And the most recent issue of the archives has some letters about it. And it's an open issue. I've had that line in my PowerPoint for years, and now I was sort of felt justified that somebody wrote an article picking up on it. And you're on a team, that's where it's we, not I, and learn to express complexities in simple language. Well, let's see, we described ways to find open positions. We found out or talked about how to evaluate practice opportunities. we learn the importance of that other life that we have away from pathology and how that plays on a decision about where to practice. The visit and the interview process and the features of a successful practice. And with that, I thank you. And one of the features of the Zoom is that I don't hear any boos or applause or anything. So I hope that this answered some questions and maybe provoked some thinking for the participants.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hausner. That was fantastic talk. You know, it's very extensive and a very thorough, review of the job hunting process. Yeah, excellent.
Yes, if anyone wishes to get follow-up, I'm easy to find. Helen can tell you how to find me. And I'd be honored if anyone were to contact me and ask for further comments on any of the points that I attempted to make. It was an honor to speak to this excellent pathologist association.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Have a
Dr.
good-
Hausner. This is Marilyn Bowie. I'm a practicing pathologist at the Moffitt Cancer Center. Thank you so much for your excellent presentation. I really love that AAA pathologist description. And I heard that before. It's affable, able, and available.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Yes, yes. And I love the examples you're showing, highlighted. Don't let the physicians figure out they can do anything without us. And also be visible and we're equal and we are the smartest one in the group. So those are really great comments. And also, as far as looking for jobs, and you showed us a lot of great resources. And right now, there's also pathology outlines. It has a lot of job openings.
Yeah. The as far as the issue about the visible pathologist, I was the only son, only child, and my father, was long retired, lived well into his 90s, and when he was about 92 or 3, he had a colonoscopy, and I went to visit him in South Florida. And he said, "Rich, I have a question for you." And he said, what is this? And it was a $13 bill from a pathologist. and I said, "Oh, Dad, that's the amount you owe." He said, what did the pathologist? This is my father, who's been talking from the rooftops about how his wonderful son. And he said, "What did the pathologist do?" Join the other side. And I said, "Well, he interpreted your biopsy and told the doctor what the findings were." He said, "My doctor told me that." Mm-hmm. And I said, "Dad, just pay the bill." And it struck me that. And that even my father, who was a bright man, he was an attorney and had a full career and everything, that in his old age, even though he was very proud of me, he didn't quite grasp what it was that I do. Mm-hmm. And there was I just gave him a hug and told him I loved him. And but it did make an impression on me. About what it is that we face in our beloved specialty. And I'll tell you, I'm an old man now. When I was at Baylor, I was the young guy, and now at UT, I'm the old guy, or one of the old guys. And If I had it to do over again, I would be a pathologist. I was a pediatrician before I was a pathologist, actually. And but if I had my career to do over again, I would start tomorrow and look for a residency and do it again. That's
Wonderful.
what I would do.
Yeah. So when we introduce to people, we'll just tell people where, for example, I work at cancer center. We'll just say, we're the cancer doctor that patients usually don't meet. They said, then what is that? I said, we make diagnosis.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
We
Well,
yeah.
yeah, it's good. And I alluded to that, is it really depends on who's asking the question.
Mhm.
Uh, you know, if someone is highly educated and alert, they get a different answer than someone that you know that just would be better giving a simple answer. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. Very good. And also another thing you mentioned, the culture fit is very important, and the skill set, if it's a fit or not. So when you come to a group, you can sense that will you be able to get along with them or not? And also the type of job you're doing, is that what you feel comfortable doing? Or if there's a future later on, because you don't want to keep moving, you want to find a job, you'll be there for a little while. So those are all important, because the salary is important, but it's never the single most important thing. Is always the package, the base salary, your time off, practice, and the other perks. On top of that, what's the other things? When you put it together, it's the quality of life, and that's how you decide if it's a good fit or not. So those are really great tips.
Great.
Yeah.
Is there anyone else?
Yes. Okay. There's some Q in the QA box, and the first one is: do you think that attaining a fellowship in a prestigious program like Mayo Clinic can potentially increase chances of finding a job in the field?
Yes. In particular, if the goal is to a long-term goal is to find a position in the upper Midwest, the Mayo Clinic is the coin of the realm. I spent some time at University of Michigan, which itself is a powerful medical center, but it would be a great enhancement, all things being equal, to there's you know that could never hurt, just never hurt. The excellent place, and they do some analytes that are just not available elsewhere, and we even send things to Mayo once in a while from Texas.
Next question is from Dr. John Zhu. And how to balance family needs and your job when switching jobs? When will be the proper time to find another job, especially for the first job?
Well, that's a moving target. There's a movie called Boyhood that is a very interesting movie. It was filmed over a period of 12 years or so, when a child was 6, and then they filmed him every year till he was 18, and they followed his life. And a child, a 6-year-old, for example, has friends, is a person, rides a bike with his friends, plays games with a friend, goes to school, and they're powerless when a mom or dad walks in and says, here's what we got. We're moving from Houston to Minneapolis. And the child thinks, well, what about, what about my friend John? And they say, well, you make new friends. Well, that is true. But from the point of view of the child, it's a devastating event. And we have, I found this out. I remember in medical school looking out my window when I was studying at 5 o'clock, seeing the staff leave. And I was thinking, boy, they're going out and the whole world changes hands after dark. You go home and you act differently. You have, like, I have pets that I have 2 cats here that nobody else knows about at work, that are a beloved part of my life. I wear different clothes. I even probably walk differently. We've all had the experience of working with someone daily, or that we know well at work, and then you run into them in an atypical situation in the mall, and you just can't place the person. You know the person, but they're dressed differently. They have people with them that you don't know, that might be their beloved spouse, their children, or they're now, instead of wearing a white coat and a tie, they're wearing jeans and a funny hat, a baseball hat, and you just can't place them, and it's them. And so all of us, when we go home not to a secret life, but to a life that very few at our workplace have any access to. And we might be different people. They don't know what kind of movies I like, or what I like to eat, or how much I exercise, or that maybe I play the violin, and they don't know that. And to the people in that second part of your life are stakeholders in your decision to move, and it's worked out on a daily basis. People work it out, but it's a person, a pathologist can't just walk into the house and say, we're moving across the country. Got a great job. There has to be a discussion and some understanding about what are we going to do about my dad, my father-in-law, that depends on us. How can we leave him? What's the plan for him? And so it of course it can be worked out. It's worked out every day, but I was just pointing out that it's not a cut and dry decision that's only based upon your career. That your loved ones, and especially the children, are powerless. And that's part of it's part of what we live with. But everybody has that. You're not just pathologists.
Yeah, I agree. It's a tough decision sometimes. You have to decide, which way to go. and try not to hurting anyone. Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah. There's another question coming up, and thank you so much for the great talk. How and when to break the news, break the information to the colleagues that you are leaving without hurting their feelings too much?
Well, the way to do that is to be sure to be sensitive to what you're doing at your job. If you're involved in a big clinical study and are an important part of that, that can be you have to give people lead time, and the more time you give, the better it is. The worst thing you can do is walk in and say, I have another job, I'm leaving in 2 weeks, and the schedule has already been written for another 6 months. That's one that at some point, if there are hard feelings, there are hard feelings, but you do whatever you can to mitigate it. And the biggest thing is giving people lead time, as much time as you can.
Yeah.
Whether that's weeks or months, usually months.
I actually have a question for you. And based on your extensive experience, both in academic and private setting, so how many times have you seen people, because you mentioned about the contract stuff, right, reviewed by the attorney, how many times have you seen your candidates came back to you with the reviewed contract with the attorney's comments?
Well,
and how do you see that? Yeah.
What I tell them at the beginning is that this is our standard contract. And that being said, I even use that word, that being said, it's 100, I won't allow you to sign it and me sign it without you showing it to an attorney and someone who's an independent advocate for you, rather than you. And if they say, I trust you, I say, I appreciate that, but the format is that you have to show it to an attorney.
So you
And
encourage
then
them to show.
I insist on it.
Mhm.
Insist on it. And remember now, this was a private practice. This wasn't, I'm not like Exxon or anything.
Mhm.
This is a, something that I had written, and I had written for me, and actually, if in several occasions, it's come back with 1 or 2 comments and that were helpful and that I agreed with. And I think in every case, I modified everyone else's contract to make it fairer if it was something that I overlooked. Sometimes it's the best contract is one that everybody signs and then it goes in a drawer and nobody looks at it again. That's really the best one. But if it ever comes down to it, it's protecting that person and it's protecting me. And I would tell them, I say, I really, if it comes back where it's totally unsatisfactory, then I just need to know that. And it's working for everybody else here. And that doesn't mean that it's perfect, But if it comes back where you want something completely different, it's unlikely that I'll be able to accommodate you
Mhm. Yeah.
and leave it at that. And then, that's pretty fair warning. And even at that, when you're dealing with an attorney, this is now on point. Is some of the listeners may not be that familiar with it. When a client goes to an attorney, it's wise to tell the attorney what it is we're trying to do. So what I would at some point possibly count, depending on how the conversation went, say, show it to an attorney, but tell the attorney that you want the job and that this is a good deal and that I want it to work. Meaning the client, that of course I want it to work too, but just to walk in and say, Mr. Smith, very nice to meet you. Here's what I have, a contract from a pathology group that I really like, and they have a very good reputation, and this is their standard contract. And they asked that I get an attorney to look it over, and they really, I can tell you that if we redline the whole thing, they won't appreciate it. Now, if you tell me that it's terrible, I'd be a little concerned because everybody seems to be happy in that group, and that would be my peers. And so the attorney then is less motivated to go in and start writing all sorts of wants that are impossible. Things like I don't know what could come up. Like it might be in a contract that vacation can accrue for forever, but with any vacation longer than I don't know, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, you tell me, would require permission. And he says no. Says if you have vacation, you should be able to take it. And they come up with that. And this is just an example out of my head that I'm thinking of, and it can come back and if it's just that, you could say, it just would be disruptive. Our workflow just doesn't permit it. I suppose it could be possible in some emergency situation, but as a general rule, we wouldn't approve it. And if that's it, then the day is saved. If they come back and say, he said it says 10 days, and if you really count it out, it really should be 16, because because somebody could leave on a weekend, on a Friday night, and be gone for 3 weekends. So it'd be 10 work days and 6 weekdays, 16. So maybe it shouldn't be 10, it should be 16. And then you think about it and you say, of course. I don't know if you followed me on that. Okay, if you go on vacation for 2 weeks and you finish on a Friday, okay, you're gone for 5 work days, and 5 work days, 10. But then you have the first weekend, you have the second weekend, and you have the third weekend. That's 6 days. So if it says 10 days and the lawyer comes, I'm just giving this in as an example, lawyer comes back and says, well, 10 days, yeah, but it doesn't specify that they're not going to be put on weekend call on the so why don't we make it 16? And that way, you could you can really have a nice vacation. And that would be something that if that happened, it's an example out of my imagination tonight. But if somebody came to me and said that, I would say, you're right. And let's change it.
Mhm.
And I change it for everybody.
Right, that's
And
reasonable.
you understand? And then,
Yes.
but if it comes back and that's in the middle of all sorts of other things, then you say to yourself, I don't know if we really want to, that may not be the right position. We may not be the right group for this person because the contract would be completely different from everyone else.
All right, so we have the last question from the chat box. Also, Dr. Chewing Shi asked, excellent talk and very practical topic for career development. How do you know whether you fit in the culture before you start new job? Thank you.
Oh, that's you can tell by eye contact. You can tell by a smile. You can tell by if they say, while you're here, when are you leaving? You say, well, I'm leaving tomorrow. I got a flight at 2:00. Says, just for the heck of it, we can have a realtor go and show you around to just a couple of the neighborhoods where you might be interested if you're going to come here. See, it can signal an interest, and you might, and it's just a matter of making a connection, and you get a feel when I had my first job at Baylor. I was I was a young kid, and I met a young pathologist named David Yawn, who was a couple of years further along than me, had been there for a couple of years. And I just hit it off with him. He had some cases he showed me, and we were talking about career and things he was interested in. He said, this is really a good place, and I've really been happy here and all that. And I just knew it. And I met one of the residents, Dr. Wheeler, who's a first-year resident, went on to become chair of the department, and he was sort of amazed that a fourth-year resident could possibly be interviewing for a faculty position there. And I told him that one day you'll be great. And then he went on and became the chairman of the department for about 15 years. And I met him on the interview, and I knew that that's where I wanted to be. Now, why did I leave Baylor? What happened was I was there for 3 or 4 years, and it was the late 70s and early 80s. And I was in Houston. I had 2 young kids, and there was a terrible inflation at that time, much worse than what we have now. And they raised my salary, but it was still it was just impossible to continue without doing so. I just couldn't afford to be there, and that otherwise I'd probably still be there. It's just an alternative life that never happened, and went on to become something else. And so there are all these forks in the road in a long career. Let's see, I'm an old man now, so I'll be 77 in a couple of months. And, it goes by in a blink. Um, uh, uh, but, I can think back to when, the smartest thing I did was become a pathologist. That was the best thing I did. I was made for it.
So when you look back, reconsider, I'm just, just imagine if you were young again, would you choose, you have another choice to choose, right? So would you pick academic or private?
I would probably pick academic. The reason being that in the decades, the economic incentives. I'm really not driven by money. It might seem like I am, but the difference has narrowed, and there's so much I just like being around residents and medical students and the excitement of a big place. I did well in the other practice, but even though that I had good relations during the day, I made very few personal friends along the way, and I was driven to pathology societies, and I ended up president of the Medical Society, of the Texas Society of Pathologists, the CAP, and I had a practice that enabled me to do that. If you want to be president of the CAP, you can't. You have to ask them up front, because if you want to go to a CAP committee and become active in the CAP, you for example, that's time away from the group, and somebody else is doing the work back there, not having the glory. And what they've got a meeting in Yellowstone National Park, and everybody thinks you're going there and you're going to walk around and see Old Faithful, and you're just in a committee meeting for the whole weekend and fighting your way back to Houston on Sunday. But you had to leave on Thursday night, and that meant you had to leave Thursday afternoon. Someone had to do the work on Friday, and the jealousy comes to play, and so I was able to do it. I had the right staff and the right support people, and it was just what I did. And but not everybody could do it. So that's another that's yet another factor. I can talk about this stuff all day long. To talk about all the different things that I've experienced and that I know, or but I've changed. When I got to UT after so long in private practice, even with all that I did, I changed my mind on certain things. I was adamant about that you had to write a microscopic description, and I realize now that it could be incorporated into the comment and even into the diagnosis. But I'm just as firm that if you get a biopsy that says rash, what you do is you go into the medical record and see what they're talking about, rather than just, look at it in vacuo. That you because AI can do a lot of that kind of stuff. But Songlin Zhang points out that only a pathologist has a heart, and AI does not have a heart, and that you make the report alive, you make it obvious that you put the work in to see what's going on, because that's your patient. That the patient is ultimately, one way or another, is paying for that. That's your client, not the doctor, not the hospital. It's the patient. And so that's what, then we're gifted with the medical record now. And so we have the opportunity to get that information easily now.
All right, I think it's 7:43. I think it's.
We did it. We did
Yeah,
it.
we did
Okay.
very well. We have a very
Okay.
extensive discussion. Everybody benefited. Thank you so much, Dr.
Okay,
Hausner.
thank you
Yeah.
very much.
Thank you all the
very much.
audience. I mean, thank you for you joining in. I hope you learned some tips from Dr. Hausner. Thank you so much again. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Helen, for organizing this. Bye.
Bye-bye.